Welcome to the Round 6 podcast, a weekly roundtable discussion featuring a variety of automotive subjects, interviews, special guests, and stories, hosted by the Round 6 Gearheads, Brian Stupski, Brad King, Alex Welsh, and Eric Hibbs. On episode 14, the Gearheads sit and talk hot rods, tuckers, and racing on the beach with the one and only Rob Ida. Tonight on America's favorite podcast-based game show, Know Thyself, Mr. Rob Ida of Morgantown, New Jersey will be tasked with answering a half dozen questions about his life, his career, and his passion for automobiles. Should he fail to answer even one of these questions correctly, he'll be drawn and quartered and have his spilled insides squeegeed up and sent off to be used for scientific experiments and use in cosmetic beauty products. Are you ready, Rob? All right, here we go.
Sounds good. I'm ready for that.
Well, I got
Have you been
after
rehearsing that all day? That was
Boy,
great.
I was going to ask that. Nicely done, man.
You got to do a fun intro.
Nicely done.
Bob Pardo, tell him what he's won.
That'd be great. So the first question, how the heck are you tonight, sir?
I'm good. I'm real good. I just got back from the shop, so we had a long week. Our week was full of all kinds of things hot rod. We spent most of it concentrating on that Gene Winfield Roadster, which you may have seen.
Oh, yes, we have.
So that kind of started at the Greenwich Concours. That was a week ago Saturday. We took that car to the Greenwich Concours, and just for the second year, Greenwich has been showing hot rods at their event. So they invited a few of our cars. One was the Googie's Gasser that we recently restored. The 1940 Gasser that used to run, Willie's Gasser used to run out in Arizona in 68, 67, and 68. Set a couple of records. So that was the first Gasser they've ever invited to the Greenwich Concours. In addition to the Tucker that you guys saw at SEMA, the handmade turbo Tucker, and then finally the 32 Ford Roadster that Gene Winfield actually started working on back in 1948. He said prior to him getting his hands on it in 48, the car was raced at Muroc, fenderless, and it came to him when it was purchased by Lou Thompson, and he put the fenders back on it and made kind of a street car back out of it. He says he remembers welding and letting the cowl vent in for the first time, and that was in 1948. But interestingly enough, he's always worked on that car since 1948. Every owner of the car has always brought it back to Gene, and so he did a full custom build on it in '53. It was in Hot Rod magazine back in the late '50s, and Carcraft. It was on the cover. So the car has an awesome history. And so now I'm the current owner of it. So,
Cool.
Yeah, it is such a cool car. I mean, now it's got a blown Arden equipped flathead in it. And,
Wow.
yeah, it's a hell of a car. I mean,
That sounds good, too.
Yeah, it sounds so good. In my opinion, that 32 is probably what you'd build if today you were going to build your fantasy traditional hot rod. It would be that Auburn dashboard and Halbrane quick change rear, all the things that you'd want to put in your fantasy car. But this car had it. It actually had it from back in the day. He says Gene said that he remembers getting the dash from an Auburn and putting it in that car way back then. So I mean, it is really just one hell of a car. It's got it all. And so anyway, we showed it at the Greenwich Concours, and it won the Brock Yates Award, which we were really happy about that. But just a few days after, Gene comes flying in from Mojave, and he gives a class, metal shaping class, right in our shop. And now we're talking about a guy who's 91. He'll be 91 years old this coming Saturday. And so he flies in from California to New Jersey. I mean, just that flight alone is enough to knock most people out. But I pick him up at, I think it was about 7 or 7:30 p.m. By the time we get to back to my shop, it's probably close to 9. And what do? We automatically put in like 2 or 3 hours preparing for his class the next morning.
What a champ.
He has got energy
Guy's
like I can't even
He is
imagine.
amazing.
Guy's an animal.
He really is. He's amazing. So we're all prepared for the class, and he says, okay, pick me up at the hotel tomorrow morning at 7. Class starts at 9. I want to get ready. So I pick him up early in the morning, 7 o'clock, bring him over to the shop. We put another few hours in preparing for the class. Class comes in now. It's 43 people. Imagine, you have 43 people. Not only are they all excited just to meet Gene and just talk to him and get his autograph and see him, and he has to be energetic and polite and answer all these questions. But then he has to go into like almost 10 hours of metal shaping class. And I'm not talking about like on a chalkboard. Like he's actually cutting and welding and hammering and shaping on an English wheel, doing everything that it takes to give a full detailed explanation of these things that he's learned and that he's picked up over 70 years of doing this, 75 years of doing this kind of work. So
so cool.
Yeah, so cool. So the class ends. I think he probably wrapped up maybe about 7 o'clock on the first day. So he was already there for 12 hours. And someone brings a hood in for him to paint. That they're doing a raffle car for charity. So he wraps up the class, goes right into my spray booth, and starts doing one of his famous fade paint jobs. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, the guy, I keep saying it, but he's 91 years old and he just doesn't stop. So
I can't do that at 46.
Yeah, I know. And so now he's in the booth. He's spraying. It's like a 3-color fade paint. One of his famous fades. Clears it, comes out great. So by the time we wrap that up, it's probably 10 o'clock. Now we're going to go eat some dinner at 10 o'clock and get him back to the hotel. Right back at it the next morning. Same thing. Pick him up at 7 o'clock. Comes back to the shop. It's a full day. And so all 43 people, I think that they were just totally thrilled with the experience that they had with him. They learned a lot, and it was a good time. He kept everybody entertained. But then the next morning, what do? Friday morning, we load the cars up and we head down to the Race of Gentlemen. That's the race on the beach.
Right.
So Mel Stoltz, he started this Race of Gentlemen, I think 7 years ago, right here in New Jersey.
Yep.
And as Mel explains it, I think he's right on when he says that it was just him and a couple of his drunk buddies wanted to race their hot rods on the beach. So somehow or another, he charmed the mayor of the local beach over here, close to me, to allow that to happen. And I remember the first year being there, it was totally unorganized. Not that it's much more organized now, but I mean, it was really chaos that first year. I remember the state police showed up, and they were going to shut him down, but somehow Mel has got a way about him. He charmed them right back into letting the race happen. And
oh my gosh!
And we're not talking about cars that are equipped with roll bars or modern seat belts or even helmets. I mean, we're talking about throw something on your head and drive that car down the beach. Or motorcycles. Not only cars, but we're talking about like suicide shifted motorcycles.
There were a couple of wrecks this year too, weren't there?
There were a couple of wrecks this year, and that may change things for the Race of Gentlemen. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to pan out.
Did anybody get hurt?
Yeah, 2 guys. One guy from Japan. I'm not sure where the other guy was from. He was from the States, but I'm not exactly sure where. And I think they were both on motorcycles. They went down and got busted up pretty good. So I think that things are going to change. Now, Sunday morning, the second day of racing, Mel comes out and he says, okay, we need real helmets. All of a sudden, things got serious now. There was an accident. So no more of these vintage helmets that you bought on eBay because they look cool. We need DOT helmets. And this is right on the starting line. He's telling us this. So, like 2 people had helmets in their trailers or whatever. So now he's going to share 2 helmets amongst like 100 racers.
Would you like the house helmet? Awesome.
Yeah. Well, imagine this. You have to make a run, and then someone has to get the helmet off that guy, run it back to the starting line for the next guy.
Like a relay.
Yeah, relay.
It's like bowling shoes. You spray it between a rack shoes.
Yes, the pomade builds up inside of it. It becomes safer and safer.
Suddenly the helmet doesn't fit anymore. It's too tight.
Well, that's when Gene tapped out. He said, okay, I think we're done racing because we're not going to get many runs in. And he had to fly back to California that night. But he did it, though. I mean, we got up early in the morning on Saturday. we drove the car. And it's a fully fendered 32 Roadster. So we drove the car out onto the beach, put it in the pits, and that's where we took all the fenders off. We took the headlights off, the windshield, all the street gear. We took it off right there on the beach, left it in our pit, and Gene put his helmet on, he strapped himself in, and he raced down the beach. I mean, he really did great.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, it was so exciting to see it. I mean, here's a guy, he's a living legend, a guy who's done it all. And I got to say, if you don't love Gene, then you probably just don't know him. Because
you haven't met him yet. Yeah.
Oh my God, he is such a great guy. If you get the opportunity and you could spend some time with him, do it. He is the real thing. And I got to say, before I knew him, I had this image in my mind that maybe Gene is overrated or maybe it's all hype or what, because I didn't really pay much attention to a lot of the things that he did. I knew some of the more famous things, the customs and the things that most people know about Gene. But once I really got to understand that he's done it all. I mean, the guy, he's got a NASCAR license from 1952. I mean, yeah, he has done it all. He's made movie cars and he's made show cars and race cars and he's built them and he's driven them. And he's done an awful lot of innovative things, not only for styling, but for performance. He's just a well-rounded guy. And I think he's as relevant today as he ever was. And he's sharp as a tack. When you talk to him, you forget that he's the age that he is because it never seems to come up. And it doesn't really have an impact on the conversation because he's up on what's new and what's going on. And he's just got a sensibility about him that's amazing.
He's where all of us want to be at that age. If you're a hot rodder, that's what you want to be. You want to be hammering down at 91. That is awesome.
Oh, it's awesome. It really is. So very inspiring guy, just in so many different ways. Now, I think some of you guys go to Syracuse.
That's a heck of an event.
It is. I mean, I think they're getting like close to 9,000 cars there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big one. And
it's a great venue too.
It is. It really is. The fairgrounds are excellent there. So that's where Gene chose to do his top six. So he invites 6 cars in from around the country, and cars that he saw during the year that really excited him. So he'll bring those cars in, and I think he pays maybe about $1,000 to each person just to get there. And then once they're there, now they're competing for a $10,000 prize. And so 2 years ago, we won that with the car that I built for Jack Hiley. And that's really when I got to know Gene, was after that. And so Jack Hiley, he owns the blue 40 Merc 3 window that we did a couple of years ago.
I remember that. Big flowing skirts on it, that one?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep, that's the car.
Oh, beautiful car.
Thank you. Thanks. So Jack competed for that award. That was the only thing that he ever really competed. I've never shown a car competitively, ever. In all of my life, I've never competed for anything except for that. And the only reason why we entered that, well, number one, Gene invited us to it. That was a nice thing. But then I really started to understand Gene's body work, and I really started to understand how much that means, because here's a guy who knows what he's looking at. He's done it all for so long, since the beginning of hot rodding. And so I started to really think, well, if I'm going to compete for something, usually we don't know who the judge is, or if the judge is a qualified builder, or where he comes from. Maybe he's just kind of sponsoring a trophy or what. I never know that. So that's why I never really compete. Not that art should be competitive anyway. I look at these cars as an artistic expression. And should they really compete? Should they be a contest, or just be appreciated? I always felt that they should just be appreciated. Either you like it or you don't. And if you like it, great. If it inspires you to do something on your own that maybe looks like that, or maybe not. Maybe it inspired you to say, I'm going to stay away from a car that whatever it is.
Well, that's also inspiration.
Yeah, it is. It's inspiration. It moves you in a direction. And as long as a car moves you, then I think that as a builder or designer, then we're doing our job. And So anyway, we did compete for that one and only award with Gene. And Jack was always an admirer of Gene Winfield. He said when he was growing up, he used to read about him in magazines. So it kind of meant a lot to him as well. And so we won the award. And Jack, being the wonderful guy that he is, he takes that $10,000 prize and he donates it right back to the Ronald McDonald charity, which put the event on.
Outstanding.
And, yeah, I mean, he's just such a class act. So he did that, and I know Gene appreciated it, and so I'm surrounded by great people, and I'm very fortunate to have that. But so that may be the only time that we ever compete for anyone, for any award. That was the one and only, and so it was a great experience for us. And since then, Gene and I have kept in touch, and so now when I bought this car, when this 32 came up, and I didn't know much about it really, because I always thought, like I said, Gene for more customs than for hot rods. But when this car came up, and they said that Gene built it, I called Gene and I said, "Really, is this true?" And he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I've built that 4 times. I built that car 4 times since 1948." And he told me about every nut and bolt on it. So I had to have it. And so once I got it, and of course, me buying a car that someone else built, that's new for me too, because I always built my own stuff. And
right.
So I'm not really one who goes out and buys something and kind of collects it or does a lot of that type of thing. I usually build my own car. Number one, because I can't ever afford to buy someone else's, so I have to build my own. And two, I usually build it the way I like it, and I don't even try to look for something else, because that's just what I do. But when this came up, I felt like it was kind of meant to be, and then I had this idea: oh, wouldn't it be cool to not only enter it in a Concours event, but race it at the Race of Gentlemen with Gene behind the wheel. So we just did that. It was a great week, and Gene went back on Sunday, and we're just kind of looking back and saying what an amazing week we just had with that car. A car that I really didn't do a whole lot with, but now suddenly has become a big part of my life, just from the experience, not from the build experience, but from what Gene had to add to it.
Yeah, and you've got something now that it's like it becomes kind of a family heirloom over time, where it's got so much history behind it. You've got that great emotional attachment to it, and you it falls right into that whole thing of yours where cars aren't built to be competitive devices, but instead now you've got something that you have an emotional attachment to, and it's there because you like it, the history, you can enjoy that. That's beyond cool. And it almost seems fitting that it wound up in your hands.
I feel like it was meant to be, really. I mean, the way it fell into my hands was pretty amazing. And so I'm not looking to sell that one anytime soon. That's going to stay in the bank. In fact, next week, or in 2 weeks, I was invited to take it on a hill climb. And so I've done some hill climbs in the past in a 356 Porsche. But this will be a new experience. So I've left the fenders off it. It still looks all full of beach sand and everything right now from the Race of Gentlemen. So I'm going to just kind of leave it that way. It's lettered up. It's got numbers on it. So we're going to take it to the hill climb in Long Island in 2 Sundays from now. We'll see how we do there.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's a vintage event. It's a 1940 cutoff. So I think my car probably have more power than everybody else's because it has an overhead valve conversion and a supercharger. So I know that I kind of have an unfair advantage. And so I think they're going to put me in an exhibition class so that, just to keep things fair. Because the heads on the car are really from 1948, and they don't quite make the cutoff. So it's going to be just more of a fun experience. And again, we don't really care to compete. It's not what it's about. It's about going up the mountain and having a lot of fun, and hopefully keep it on 4 wheels. So
shiny side up. So what's that Arden making? North of 300 horse?
Yeah, it made 310 horsepower at the crankshaft.
Bitchin'. So
Ferguson
cool.
built the engine, did a beautiful job. The engine's a work of art. I mean, it runs so good. So the paperwork that came with the car showed me that it made 310 horsepower at 6 pounds of boost. And it has a Scott supercharger on it. And then we just recently put it on my dyno at the shop just last Thursday. In fact, Gene drove it on the dyno, and it made 270 at the wheels. So
That's pretty good.
That's really good for a flathead car, man. I was so impressed.
So you could throw a turbo 400 in there and end up with 9 horsepower at the wheels.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, I've got a 1958 BA that makes 0 horsepower. It's fresh built.
Yeah. What's that in?
A 54 2-door sedan.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So the 32 is a nice addition to the group. It's already bringing lots of fun and memories, and we're excited about that. Moving forward with Gene, he's got a couple of projects that he started back in the 60s, and he'd like to get them finished. And for various reasons, they didn't get done. But we're considering maybe taking a look at them, because imagine this. It's great to build a custom or restore a custom or recreate a custom that was done, back in the 60s or 50s. But how about if one was already started and never finished, and it would finally get done now, under Gene's direction, with some of his current handwork being involved, some of what he did back then. I mean, that's a pretty special thing. That doesn't just happen. Yeah. These cars are like NOS customs. I mean, they're like not they're not done. They're just sitting there waiting to get done, and they are absolutely spectacular as far as the concept goes. So that might be something that could happen sometime.
I wonder if you could do something kind of reverse psychology wise with these cars, where they're all they're period perfect. They've got the period parts on them and everything. But maybe as you show them, just explain to people. It's like, no, we just picked up all the parts over on Night Prowlers, eBay.
Yeah. Well,
spend a lot of time engraving "Made in China" on the back of parts. That's, oh my God. See, that's the kind of stuff I live for.
Yeah.
And the cool part is, I mean, he's such an icon, and now you're getting a chance to build something, or actually I should say to finish something that's never been seen.
Right.
That's just, my mind just melted on itself.
Yeah. I mean, they've never been seen. Exactly right.
Man.
Yeah. And the stories behind them, I'm not sure he's ready for me to share the stories yet, but the stories behind them were as interesting as the cars. So if and when that happens, I think we'll have a lot to talk about on that subject.
So we'd like to schedule with you now to have you back to talk about that.
Well, a lot of what we do in our shop is always, we need that emotional attachment to these projects. We don't take them in based on billable hours. That really never even plays a part in us deciding if we're going to take a project on. We look at a couple things. One is what is the project, and two, who's it for, and what's he going to do with it? And usually, a lot of that has to do with what does it mean to him? Why does he want this, and why do we want this, and are we inspired enough to take it on? Because they're grueling. The projects are grueling. They don't just put themselves together. Any car builder will tell you that. You suffer over these things. So if you're going to commit to a project or a chunk of your life that you're going to suffer over, a lot of the cars that I build take 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 years to build. I mean, I put a lot of time in these things, and we don't have a big group. We're not one of these shops that have 20,000 square feet and 50 employees. We don't have that. There's 6,000 square feet, and it's 4 of us, and we work our asses off. Every inch of the place is packed with work, and it's not a show place either. You walk in there, don't expect to see shiny floors and neons. We say that our shop is decorated with work, and that's it. Everywhere you look is work, whether it's scrap metal on the floor, grindings, dirt, whatever. It's a result of the work, and we don't really put a lot of time and energy into the things that don't matter, the things that don't add to that car. It's always about the car. Everything is about making that car better, as good as you can make it, whether it's a race car that needs to go fast, and we're going to put all our energy into making it perform, or if we're going to build a car that's more about its beauty, we're going to put all the effort we can in the detail and the styling, and also knowing when to stop. We feel like we know when to stop, and we try not to overdo these cars. We put a lot of thought into doing everything that needs to be done, but no more. And sometimes cars, I feel, are overfinished and overprocessed and overdeveloped, and that's another reason why I stay away from competitive type car events, because I feel like it has a negative impact when you're trying to score points or satisfy a checklist. And I'm not saying that I'm right and show car builders are wrong. It's just that I'm not into that. I like a car that has a sweet spot and knows where it is, and when you look at it, it's just right. It should feel right. It should feel like what it's supposed to look like. And sometimes if a car is over processed and over polished, it becomes sterile and looks fake and like a toy. And I don't really like that. I like a car to look like a car. And you shouldn't have to worry about having fasteners because cars have fasteners. You know, they do. They have screws and they're held together with something. And in the 90s, we hit every fastener. We made everything look like it couldn't happen. And,
like it was poured out of a can. The whole car was poured out of a can.
Yeah, and that's what we thought was right at the time.
Yeah,
and we did it. And maybe, you know what? I mean, one day that will come back. I know it will, because we've always made fun of cars from the 60s, and then now they're back, and they're the coolest thing. And then the 70s are going to come back, and that's the coolest thing. So I know that eventually that look from the 80s and 90s that we laugh at now will come back.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brian can't wait to start wearing bell bottoms again. So
wait, what do you mean start?
He'll be ready for that.
Well, it's this again stuff, man.
Golfing shorts and Oakley blade sunglasses.
With the Z Cavaricis.
Well, I love the fact that you hit on something that we had talked about just a couple weeks ago on the podcast as a group. We got into the whole subject of that whole over-processing of a car and bolting on anything and everything you could possibly put on. You know, when do you get to the point where you're saying, okay, form versus function? You know, do I need, again, do I need carbon fiber ball joints, or would, these off-the-shelf units, are these going to be fine? Do I need to over-engineer something? And, that's what I love about your cars. You look at something, again, like the Merc. You look at that car, your mind is blown because there's so much reverence to a historical, kind of a historical mindset on that thing, but yet there's little things that blow your mind because they're so trick and engineered. And once your brain starts to wrap around how much engineering there is, you look at things like, you go, oh my God, these guys made, leather boots to go over suspension parts. And man, see, the stuff you do that's over the top just seems right. And you find that really that sweet spot. I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass or anything like that. I'm just, I mean this sincerely.
Well, it's well received.
Well, awesome. Keep blowing, bro.
More smoke.
I'm going to have to edit that out. It's going to be a ringtone now.
No, we do. We put a lot of effort into knowing just when to stop. We love engineering. We do. And we love when engineering could go in a car and be invisible. And for instance, that Merc has things about it that most people don't even know are a part of the car. Like the air intake for the supercharged engine on the Merc. It looks like it has two air cleaners that hang off the supercharger, two round, kind of like oil bath style air cleaners. They are actually cool cans for the supercharger. It has an intercooler below the supercharger with liquid that runs through those two oil bath air cleaners that have coils in them. So you could pack them with ice if you wanted, and for a cool can. But the air is actually coming in through the factory cowl vent. So our car didn't need a cowl vent, but it looks right in the car because it came with a cowl vent, and that's what you'd expect to see behind the hood is a cowl vent. But that's also the perfect place to get the best possible air when that car goes down the road to feed the engine. So we move the throttle body to the back of the supercharger, feeds into the firewall, and it almost goes unnoticed. You can't even really tell that it happens, but it goes into the firewall. Behind the dash is kind of a soundproof box that is real heavy wall insulated box behind the dash, and inside that is an air filter and mass airflow sensor. And we took the 5-volt signal from the drive-by-wire system, and we connected that to a servo. So now as you apply throttle with your foot, the cowl panel opens in proportion to the throttle blade. So you're getting
cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
You're
Air
getting
grabber hood from a Mopar.
Air grabber hood. You're getting the best possible air charge. It's almost like having a Hillborn scoop on the hood, but the car wouldn't look right with a Hillborn scoop on the hood. So we didn't compromise in design, and we didn't compromise in performance. And I think anytime you can find the point where great engineering and great styling without compromise to either one, when they could meet equally, then you really have something special. I always say, you can make a dump truck that works perfectly, but it still looks like a dump truck, or you could make something that is just beautiful but doesn't even move and doesn't work or function. And those are two good things. But if you can have both, if you can have the engineering and the styling without compromising either, then you really have something great. And that's the challenge, is finding that balance. That is the challenge, and I love that. And I love when we get it. And sometimes we're struggling on a part of a car, and we know that there's better. We could do better, but it just hasn't come to us yet. We just don't know what it is yet. And we'll just keep looking at it and playing with different things. We'll throw away a concept 10 times if we have to, and hopefully we don't have to, but sometimes you do, and eventually it feels right, and you got it. And so we love that. That's always the big payoff. As I said, we don't really do these things for the money. We need the money because you have to run a business, but that's not.
Yeah, got to keep the doors open.
Yeah, you got to keep the doors open, but that's not what fuels the project. There are so many of these projects that we lose money on, but we do it because we love it. All for the good of the project.
Lose a little on every deal, but make it up in volume, right?
Yeah, volume when it takes 5 years to build a car.
Well, that time machine in the back of the shop helps.
But yeah, we're working on that one next.
So, not to jump around too much, but you talking about finding that balance between engineering and design, it all makes perfect sense that in the over the past years, you guys have really gotten involved with some absolutely cool Porsche projects.
Oh yeah,
I love the Porsche projects. I really do. And only recently did I realize how many people love both hot rods and Porsches. And I think that I was totally unaware of that because, for instance, my father and our local groups around here have zero interest in a Porsche, like none. And so I assumed that was pretty much the mentality of most hot rodders, that they didn't like Porsches. It's one or the other. But I kind of like almost every type of car, and which is like to a fault. I want to have all of them, but once I started kind of bringing our hot rod stuff into the Porsches, then I started to realize there's a lot of people that have both and like both. And just the other day, a guy walks in, and he was there for some 32 Ford stuff, and I'm finishing up a 930 right now. For Mike Terzich, and he sees a car in the shop, and right away I'm gonna ignore the Porsche because I figure he's a 32 guy. Let's go over and talk about the 32 stuff. He goes, he goes, I'm a Porsche guy. I want to look at this 930. So then he's looking at the car, and then he shows me that he's got a couple of Porsches and he's got a couple of 32s, and I said, look at that. He's a man after my own heart. But there seems to be more of that than I realized. So we're into 356s. We're into 911s. 930 Turbo is really my car, and so we've been seeing more and more of that coming into the shop, and I like it because they're a little easier to build than hot rods. we don't have to suffer over every piece of them because there are parts there that we can benefit from. We can still call Porsche and get parts that make those cars easy to go together. No, we can't do that with the Tucker dealer. We can't call the Tucker dealer and get the parts we need. Unfortunately, we have to make all that stuff.
Was that a hard sell to anybody else to do the Porsche and the Tucker thing?
No. It all comes pretty easy. And I'm like a Willys guy, a Tucker guy, and a Porsche guy. So when you walk in my shop, you're surrounded by Willys, Tuckers, and Porsches, which is an odd combination. But somehow we stayed busy with those three. and people seem to like it. I don't know. They walk in and they're interested in hearing about the Tucker, our family history with the Tucker, with the cars that we're building, and then I think that the styling that we're doing now on the Porsche 930 seems to excite a lot of people, and that's triggering some new projects that are coming our way, Porsche related. And the Willys thing has just always been part of the the family love too. My father, he was a gasser, a racer back in the 60s. He started with a 34 Ford with a blown 409 in it when he was still in high school. He bought a 409 in 1962 when that engine just came out. He bought it, just like the song. He saved his pennies and he saved his dimes and he bought a brand new 409. And that's exactly what he did. He saved his lunch money from high school and he worked at the gas station that my grandfather owned. And that's what he did. He went to the Chevy dealer and heard about this new big block that was coming out, and he bought a crate engine, and he adapted a supercharger onto it, and he had the world's fastest and blown 409 in a channeled 34.5 window, which is just the coolest car ever. Yeah, it is just the coolest thing. He doesn't have it anymore, but the pictures are enough to make your heart race. And for me, looking at pictures of that car and the Hemi Healy, which we recently found the original car and restored the Hemi Healy for my dad's 70th birthday, and then we just made a clone of his 409 powered Willys sedan. We couldn't find the original car, but we made one that looked just like it. And so those are the kind of projects that just excite us, and those are the cars that got me absolutely hooked on hot rods when I was a kid. Now, there was a short time when my father was kind of out of hot rods. He decided that they were just too expensive and too dangerous for racing. He's got to get serious about running his repair shop business and raising his family. So when I was a kid, he wasn't really doing any hot rod stuff. He was repairing cars, just like regular transportation cars. He was repairing them with a collision shop and a repair shop. And his hobby was horses. So he moved from Brooklyn to New Jersey, kind of into the country, horse country, and met some new people, and he got interested in horses. So when I was growing up, that's what his focus was kind of rodeo and horses. And then one day I found his scrapbook, and I opened it up, and there was the Hemi Healy. It was just this big color picture of the Healy on its back bumper. He was doing his wheel stand. It was the final run for that car, because when it came down on the wheel stand, it bent in half. And he took all the race car parts off of it and sent it to the local junkyard, and that was the end of that car. But that image, I remember it like it happened 5 minutes ago when I opened it up and I saw the image of that car standing on its rear bumper, and I said, that is the most badass thing I've ever seen in my life. And I still think it's the most badass thing I've ever seen.
That thing's awesome.
It's incredible.
How old were you when you came across this?
I was 7. I was 7 years old when I came across that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you were hooked.
That's the perfect age to mark that impression. It's
Yep. I was 7 years old, and I never cared about a horse again after that. I said, forget these horses, Dad. We got to get a hot rod. So we bought.
You don't have to clean up hot. Well, I guess you do have to clean up hot rod shit when you break something, but
yeah. Well, he still kept his horses for like ever, but we didn't pay much attention to them like we did the hot rod. So when I was 7, we had a friend who had a Willys pickup. It was an old gasser, and it was laying out in his backyard. And it was one of those things. One day I'm going to get to it, and so it wasn't for sale. But I remember calling him up, calling Steve Mastakis. I remember calling him up and saying, "You have to sell us that car. You have to sell us that Willys. We want to build it." So he did. He ended up selling it to us, and even helped us put it together. But my dad built a blown 427 Chevy and put it in there, and it was a streetable car. It was streetable, but it was a 10-second car, and now we're talking about 1980 that like this stuff was going on. So there weren't many streetable 10-second cars in 1980. That was,
your definition of streetable might be a little different than everyone else's.
It could be, yeah. We only lived 10 minutes from Raceway Park, so the ride there wasn't so bad, but it drove there under its own power, and we used to drive it all around town. And this is when cruise nights were cool, because I remember going to cruise nights with my dad and they would end when the cops would show up. And now cruise nights are sitting in a lawn chair and listening to doo-wop music and stuff, which is fine. It's a great way to spend Saturday night. But I remember when cruise nights were like outlaws, and that's what we used to do with that Willys pickup. So from that time on, I never cared about anything else but hot rods, and particularly Willys and Tuckers, because Tuckers goes back to my grandfather back in 1947 when he opened up the newspaper and he saw this car of tomorrow, which was a Tucker Torpedo, not the Tucker 48 that we all know of, but the Tucker Torpedo. It was a concept car that Preston Tucker dreamed of but never actually built. And the reason why he didn't build that car, there's a variety of reasons, but the main reason why he didn't build that car, if you ever see what a torpedo looks like, it has a turret-shaped roof. So it's a very rounded windshield, and the driver sits in the center. Problem with the center drive on that car is that when you open the door, you have to walk to your seat. Somehow or another, you have to close the butterfly door and walk to your seat and get yourself in the car. Not very practical. Getting out is not even possible. Getting out of that driver's seat and getting out of the car, you just smash your head right into the roof or the windshield. So getting in and out is not even an option. So Tucker went from that design to a squared off roof design where he can put the driver back into the traditional position over on the left. And he built 50 of those cars. And my grandfather happened to be one of the dealers for Tucker. He had a dealership that he bought in New York. He basically pulled together all the family's money and sold whatever he could sell, raised up enough capital to buy a dealership and rent a building in New York, and he did. So there's this picture that we have hanging up on our wall in the shop, kind of as an inspiration to us of the headline. It was a newspaper article. It says, "Man waits for Tucker," and a picture of my grandfather standing in front of his empty Tucker dealership. And
I've seen that picture.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's so cool. The picture's so cool. So from that time on, Tucker failed, so he wasn't able to ever deliver a car from his dealership. He took 130 orders in 3 days.
Wow.
But no dealer ever delivered a car. The cars were all seized by the government and auctioned off by the SEC. So that car is basically, 50 prototypes. They're all handmade. I'm restoring number 44 out of 50 in my shop right now, and clock is ticking. But we're bringing that to Pebble Beach in August, and so that car was in excellent condition as far as being preserved. No rust, no damage, very complete car. But the real challenge in restoring a Tucker is the quality, the build quality from 1948. The cars were stamped out of Kirkside tooling and made of 20 gauge sheet metal, so the car is thin and the parts don't fit, and they were basically put together and filled with lead and sculpted with lead. So we took nearly 200 pounds of lead out of that car, and that's factory Tucker lead. We took 200 pounds out, and we did an awful lot of metal shaping to correct the sheet metal so it didn't require that much lead or filler to get it back to the shape that it looks. So that project started in November, and the crew's been working on it ever since, and it's scheduled to debut at Pebble Beach in August.
So what do you do with 200 pounds of lead that you pull out of a car? I mean, you can't just go over into Connecticut and dump it in their water supply to make New Jersey schools look better, right?
I think what the plan is with that Tucker lead is we like to do things for charitable causes, and anything that we can do to use our cars for charity or to help someone or to inspire someone, we'll do that before we run to some event and try to win a trophy with it. We always do things with our cars that go beyond the normal waiting in line for a trophy. So we're thinking, now I don't own the lead. My customer owns the lead, but he's also a very charitable guy. We're thinking that we're going to take 200 pounds of Tucker lead and probably make either little keychains or some kind of some kind of a thing that relates it back to this Tucker number 44 that people can buy, and all 100% of the proceeds would go to a charitable cause. Yeah, I think that that lead can live on some way instead of just throwing it away. Somehow it can live on and people can enjoy it.
Hey, I got a question back to the bullet you're working on. Since it's kind of a prototype that never really got finished, I don't know what Tucker came up with or what he didn't, but the way you have the seating set up is kind of ingenious. Was that his idea or is that you?
No, that's our idea.
It's brilliant.
Thanks. So we said that we need to solve the problem. The main problem that he didn't build his car. We need to solve it. We have to come up with a way to solve it. So we were thinking of how can we use modern technology to solve the problem that they had back in '46. So then I had the idea of rotating the seat assembly. We have a flat floor. There's no transmission or drive line to run through the car, and we have nothing but flat space there. So why not? So then I turned to my very close friend, Sean Tucker, who is the great-grandson of Preston Tucker.
He's a very cool guy, too.
He's a very cool guy. Yeah, Sean is he's an engineer and automotive engineer. So he said, okay, I can do this. So he started playing with SolidWorks. And in fact, I think he even taught himself how to use SolidWorks on that project. So he went to working that thing out, knowing that we only had 4 inches of frame rail that we were willing to give up. We didn't want to have things inside the car or out. So it had to stay within that envelope. We wanted all the seats to remain facing forward at all times so that they're not twirling around. And we want them to be safe so that when the things lock in place, there's no chance of you moving around, flying out of the cockpit because the seats are spinning around. So he took that and he put it all in SolidWorks and he made it work. And then my father, he's the in-house machinist, and he also does CAD work too. But Sean engineered this one on SolidWorks, and so my father machined the parts that we needed that Sean designed on SolidWorks, and Bob Cuneo, who is he does a lot of our chassis work, and he's a brilliant guy. He's another member of the team that's just absolutely amazing. In fact, one day I think you guys should probably interview him. He's got such a history of Olympic bobsleds that he's created, Winston Cup cars, hot rods. He built all of Paul Newman's cars. I mean, you guys really need to speak with Bob Cuneo. But
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, he's awesome, and not enough people know about Bob Cuneo. He's an amazing guy. But anyway, he did a lot of the fabrication on that piece. And so all 4 of us were involved in bringing that thing to life. And now it works flawlessly. And it solved the problem that Tucker had that kept him from building that car.
So when it's locked in, does it lock pretty tight? I mean, there's no moving and it's snug down.
It's locked in. Yeah, it's got a positive lock that is electronically operated. And so once it's locked in place, you can't move it a hair, and it's super safe.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
It's very cool, and it's quiet. It moves quiet. We can control the speed. Sean used Arduino, and he was able to program it, so it'll stop softly and it'll start slow and then pick up a little speed. It has safeties in it, so let's say, for instance, somebody's leg were to get caught, it's not going to cut your leg off. It's gonna sense that and just stop. So it's very safe. Is it something that you would put in a car for the public? Well, I guess you probably could. I mean, it's engineered well enough to do that. But I think that center drive is probably not going to happen in cars, although I don't see why it couldn't. I think with this solution, it really could happen.
This is so much better than my idea for the seat, where I was going to take parts off of like an old scrambler amusement park ride. Mm-hmm. Would be great then is you get in
teacups.
You sit in the front, it throws you into the back seat, grabs the next rider. This would be great.
See, I wanted to design a slider deal for my pickup so I could just slide over, roll the window down. Instead of putting electric windows, I want a $1 zillion seat setup. So.
Oh, well, you can just move your seat track sideways.
Yeah. That's perfect.
Just get a really long handle.
Well, thank you for explaining that, because you had put pictures up and I'd seen it. It's like, what is, I mean, I knew what it was, but since I couldn't see it up close to see what it was doing, like, this is really cool. Whatever this whole concept is here, I really like it.
Yeah, well, it was the solution to an old problem. Man. And then we had access to blueprints and drawings from Tucker on the torpedo that not many people have seen. And another thing was having the gauge cluster, the speedometer and all the gauges right in the center of the steering wheel. And Tucker had a great point. Why are we always looking over the steering wheel to try to see the speedometer? The view is obstructed by the steering wheel itself. Why not have it in the center? So he left a rendering behind, but he didn't engineer it. So again, Sean Tucker did the engineering to make a stationary gauge cluster live in the center of the steering wheel. So now you can steer the wheel around it, and the gauge cluster is always remaining stationary. So that was a Tucker concept that we engineered just for this car.
But it's finished by a Tucker. That's what makes it really badass.
Right.
A Tucker started it and a Tucker finished it. That's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. And it didn't go very far out of the family, which is so cool. I mean, it just dropped down to a couple of generations. And Sean is just a brilliant guy. Sean and his brother Mike. Mike is his twin brother, and Sean is probably more of the hands-on of the two, and Mike is excellent as far as organizing things and finding things out, research. He's tremendous with it. So on Tucker 44, we are learning so many things that haven't really been discovered on all the other Tucker restorations. So we're realizing that a lot of these cars that have been restored in museums or in personal collections are following possibly a wrong standard in some ways. Oh. And so Mike has made so many discoveries of things that exist in blueprints, and now we know. So the car that we're bringing to Pebble Beach should be very, very accurate. It should be a very accurate representation of how that car actually was built in the factory.
I'm an aerospace guy, so I've been in the business for a number of years, and we do a lot of things using engineering drawings and blueprints. What was it like to go to and look at an original Tucker blueprint? Is that mind-blowing, or was that pretty cool?
No, it is mind-blowing, because Sean just sent me a picture of a hand-drawn, because these are all hand-drawn, 47, of a hand-drawn blueprint of just a simple window rubber. What holds the windshield into the body. Seems pretty simple, right? If you saw the amount of detail and information that is built into that little extrusion, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that much information was needed to make
it's like each blueprint is a piece of artwork.
Oh, they are. And
it is. I'm serious. I mean, I've looked at a lot of old Northrop prints because I worked for Northrop, and some old Northrop hand-drawn stuff from way back in the day.
Yeah.
And as you say, the detail, the angles, the views, everything, it was just slick the way they did it. The shadowing.
Oh, it's amazing.
It is incredible.
So Tucker has all of those, or access to all of them. They're part of the AACA museum in Hershey, PA, where they have 3 Tuckers on display and all the engines. But interesting story, Dave Kamak, who donated 3 Tuckers to that museum, was also the owner of all these blueprints. And the story goes that someone who worked in I think in the FBI, or I'm not sure who had access or who held these blueprints, but somehow or another they ended up in a garage in someone's house in Michigan. That house changed hands a couple times. Somebody was now going to renovate the house. So they took all these blueprints in the garage, not knowing what they were, and took them to the local dump. And just get rid of them at the dump. So luckily, the person at the dump said, no, that blue ink is hazardous material. We can't accept that. So you can't leave them here. If that person didn't say that, all those blueprints would have been gone forever. They would have been incinerated and gone forever. But luckily, that person stopped them and said, we can't accept that because it's hazardous, so take them away. So the person brings them back to the garage, now opens them up and sees it's Tucker car, doesn't really know much about Tucker car, but reaches out to somebody who happens to be Dave Kamak, the collector of 3 Tucker cars, and he said, "I'm on my way." And they filled up a big box truck. I mean, right to the top, and they have every blueprint. Now, you want to hear about something spooky? Wow. They have not only all the blueprints, but every paper correspondence that Tucker had, and this is all from the investigation. So they bring us in, and they say, "Yeah, take a look around." And we're talking about a room just full to the ceiling of paper. And Dave Kamek hired a person, I think, full time for 2 years, just to organize these things, to put them in some kind of a arrangement. So we go in, and now we're just going to poke around a little bit. And in 5 minutes, of all these millions of pieces of paper, I pull out a slice of paper out of a file, and it says Ida Brothers Tucker on it. And
wow!
It's correspondence from my grandfather. I mean, what are the chances of that happening? And it was mind blowing to me that all of these pieces of paper, it could have been anything, and it was correspondence from my grandfather. So that's horrible. All right, but then 2 years later, it happened again. I go in there and we're poking around, and they pull out another piece of paper from my grandfather. And I mean, there can't be very many from him. There were like 2,000 dealers, and all of these blueprints and all these correspondence. So the percentage of paperwork that could be from my grandfather has got to be 1 in a million. And I found 2 of them. It's mind blowing.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. So then, shortly after that, Sean Tucker's father, John, he goes downstairs. He's got a collection of Tucker things that he buys when they come available. Radios is a pretty popular Tucker thing because they made a lot of radios. And so he's going through his little collection of radios one day, and he turns one around, and it says, "Shipped to Ida Brothers, Tucker, Yonkers, New York."
No kidding.
Again, we're like, man, how does this keep happening? So he gifted that to me, and I have it, and I cherish the fact that that's on there. But like I said, my grandfather was one of more than 2,000 dealers. So it's not like there were only a couple. They were plentiful. But it's just amazing. I just feel like Preston is kind of like guiding Sean and myself, and then my grandfather's up there kind of pushing us along, and it's just weird how it happens.
I've always lived by this weird credo that all things are delicately interconnected, and it's funny to me that this is almost a case of not just that, but almost some kind of like vindication in the universe, where he's finally going to get his due, but after so much time, and still through the original family members, and that's outstanding.
Yeah, well, I mean, it still doesn't come easy. Building these cars is so damn difficult for so many reasons. And I don't know if it's just the car itself, the Tucker car, if there's something about it, but it seems like the same challenges that Preston was up against, on a much smaller scale for us, we're almost faced by the same things. And I don't know why that is, but his spirit of pushing hard and just not rolling over keeps us going, because we can't roll over either. We have to just keep pushing hard, and we do. We work hard.
Yeah, what's so crazy about the Tuckers is that a lot of the collectors were like Dave Kamak's age, and then there was a 30-year generational span where nobody was collecting those things, and all of a sudden, and now it's you guys.
Yeah. And
there's this, you guys are like the next guys that are going to be carrying the torch on these things, because you've kind of become the go-to guys on these cars as far as cosmetic restorations and Sean and Mike and doing all the research and everything. You guys are kind of the guys that are going to keep this brand alive.
Well, we think that we made Tuckers cool again, because we did a couple of hot rod Tuckers and fabricated things and put our own little spin on them. This Tucker 44 is our first full Tucker restoration. We did some restoration work on other cars in the past, but this is the first full Tucker restoration where we had this thing apart as apart as you can get it. And Sean is even restoring the bolts. This car even has the correct bolts on it. So instead of throwing away and buying new bolts, they have a marking on them. They're correct. He's CAD plated each bolt, so it is exactly right. So we're really taking it to an extreme. But why not? And we also have Mark Lieberman to thank. Mark Lieberman has restored, I think, 5 or 6 Tuckers now. And so he's also been a wealth of not only information, but also materials. He's gone through some efforts to recreate things that luckily we were able to just call him and say, hey, you have some of these that we can buy? And he goes, yep, I made a couple extra. So it's cool that he's not only able to do that for us, but also that he's willing to do it for us. So we have him to thank as well. I mean, there's so many people that are out there willing to help us and trying. And I'm also amazed how many people, are still around that had firsthand knowledge of when, the Tucker was new and it was coming out. And they come out and tell us the stories about, oh yeah, I was a kid. I was only 5 years old, but I remember like it was yesterday. I went there with my dad or my uncle or whatever, and we were going to buy one. And, hearing that kind of stuff is, it's exciting to me because I realized that this was such a big deal. It was not like just another car coming out. It was really going to change things. If it could have, who knows what cars would have looked like now, or even in the 70s, what cars would have looked like then, or in the 80s, because I think they would have been so much further along.
Right. You look at what the 48's got on it compared to everything else in that era, and man, that thing was cutting edge.
Cutting edge. And the 48 was really only a plan B. That was really only what Tucker was able to do in a limited amount of time. That was only a sample of what he wanted to do. Now, if you ever get time to go to the Hershey Museum in the AACA Museum in Hershey, you're going to see Tucker's own engine. Everybody thinks Tucker used a helicopter engine, and that was great. And that happened, but that was a plan B. Tucker made his own engine. It was a 589 cubic inch flat 6.
Jeez.
Wow.
I did not know that.
I
read a little bit on that thing. It was a 5-inch bore by 5-inch stroke.
Yes.
Oh,
you want to talk about a torque monster?
Well, that was a grunt monster.
Yeah, I think it was only going to make 2,000 RPMs, but it was going to make tremendous torque. And the coolest thing about that engine, in my opinion, is that there was no camshafts. Now, Preston was big on less moving parts. He didn't want transmissions. He didn't want valve trains. He wanted simple. He wanted everything to be simple. Now, not simple in design or concept, but simple in the end product, so that there's less to break. And he designed hydraulically operated valves. So that engine that's in the Hershey Museum runs, and there is no camshaft. It has an oil distributor that puts hydraulic pressure out to each cylinder and opens the valves. So, yeah, and think about that. Koenigsegg is only working on that now, and that's at the highest level of technology now. Tucker did it already. It ran. It worked in 1946. He also did not have a transmission. He had a hydraulic or torque converter at each wheel. So now you have all-wheel drive car, 4-wheel independent, and no drive shafts, no axles. The engine was basically now a pump, would pump oil to each wheel, each torque converter at each wheel, and it would power it forward. So if one wheel gets stuck, I mean, it's you have 3 others to keep you moving, and that works. So cool. He's so cool, and he was at this point in the 40s. So if he would have had the time and money to perfect that engineering, how would General Motors and Ford and everybody else still make a car, with a differential and a transmission? And they still do it now.
Well, it would have changed everything. Holy smokes, it would have changed design of everything out there.
Of everything. That's right. Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, you're talking about, basically, a small company that can be very agile like that, very inventive, do all this cool stuff. You gotta figure that's what planted the fear into all of the other companies, because they were so tied up in bureaucracy and red tape at every corner. Here's a guy who could go, I want to do this. Let's figure out the engineering. Bam, he could make it happen.
Right.
And that's amazing.
Yeah. Now, we also have to give the big 3 and the other car companies a little credit, too, because they had to stop for the war effort. So they had to go and make components and parts and things for the war effort. So they weren't able to develop cars. So they were kind of stuck at that point while Tucker was able to work on this new idea, his new car. But that kind of goes away when you say, all right, well, then what happened? You know, what about in the 50s and then the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and now? And now you still have a car with a differential, and you still have a car with a transmission that shifts and a camshaft, and it's still basically the same. And Tucker had a comparison between a 1948 Cadillac chassis and a 1948 Tucker chassis with a powertrain. And he was comparing how one looks so archaic and one doesn't. But the sad part is we still make the car that looks like that 48 Cadillac. It's still pretty much the same. And I mean, now it has a computer on it, and it's more refined. And it has, you know, electronics, and it has toys everywhere. But the bones are really the same. It's the same thing. That driveline and everything has not advanced.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that Tucker was way ahead, he was 40 years ahead of everybody on safety. No one was really starting to think about safety till probably the early 60s. Right. That's when safety started becoming pretty critical. And he had the padded dash, seat belts, glass that was designed to pop out.
Right.
It's just, that was, you know, who was thinking like that? Nobody was thinking like that.
No, in fact, they were thinking the opposite. They even touch on that in the movie. They didn't deliver any Tuckers with seatbelts in them because his own company, at a time when he didn't have control over every decision, insisted that they do not put seatbelts in them because it implies that the car is unsafe. And which, just for a marketing thing. And Tucker is saying that's ridiculous because now our own customers are going to be getting hurt when they don't need to be getting hurt. So he was way ahead of his time in design, styling, performance, and safety. So he had a whole new look at cars. And then why did it take so long for us to get there? Don't know.
Well, let me ask something else kind of along those lines, though. You know, because the movie really introduced the world to Tucker. I mean, what's it been? Gosh, 25 years now?
Yeah, I think it was like 85.
Yeah, so, more than 25 then.
Yeah.
Wow, damn it, I'm old. So what was left out of that movie that you think was super important?
Well, I like the fact that they vindicated him because
there
was a long time after that Preston Tucker lost, you know, his reputation. He lost his business. He also lost his health. Tucker died only 5 years later. You know, it basically killed him, or 6 years later. It killed him. It took so much out of him. If you look at pictures of Preston Tucker when he is just introducing this new car that was going to come out, and then you look at a picture of him after the company closed, you think that he aged like 30 years. And then you realize it's only a couple of years that went by. So, I mean, it took so much out of that guy. And it's just not fair. Now, my grandfather, to the day he died, always said that Preston Tucker was an honest man. He did nothing wrong. His intentions were good. And if you ever have access to go look at those blueprints at the AACA and the amount of ideas that are on paper, patent applications and revisions, there is no doubt in my mind that he wasn't doing everything he could to make the best car that he possibly could make. He was not just taking the money and running. He was working. He was working really hard. He had engineers. He had people planning and coming up with 10 different variations of every idea he could think of. So there was no doubt that he was trying to do the right thing. So I'm glad that the movie, you know, did that. It didn't make him look like a villain or a thief, because he wasn't. So for me, that's the best part, you know, is that they did that for him.
That's neat.
That is fantastic.
So being around Tuckers as much as you have, is there still one design feature that you look at every time you get inside of one of those cars or look at the outside that just blows you away every time you see it?
Well, I mean, just walking up on it, like, you know, I look at a Tucker every day. You know, I have one of my customers' cars in my showroom, but I never tire of that design, that roof line, and the way that hood comes to a point in the center. I mean, you just can't beat it. And that's all Alex Tremulous, by the way. Alex Tremulous is, or was, in my opinion, just one of the greatest car designers. The things that he did were just so cool and so far ahead, and that's why I think that the Tucker is his crowning achievement. He's designed so many vehicles, but I think that's the one that he was the most proud of, because that's the one that he had the most control over, because Tucker allowed him to be an artist. He didn't jam him up with a bunch of engineers that were going to keep changing his design. He let Tremulous do what he wanted to do, and they designed that car, and it's pure. It's a very pure design. Almost to a fault, because now I can say this, as someone who works on these cars, they're very, very difficult to line up. The way the doors fit each other, there's no standard between the doors. So in other words, you don't have a fixed hole. If both doors lined up to some kind of a fixed hole, you'd be able to have a little bit more control. But basically, both doors are floating in the side of the car, and they wrap around the roof, and they are so difficult to line up. So that if Tremulous did have time to have that design run through the engineering department, they probably would have made some revisions so that they can put the car together easier without so much handwork.
They probably would have had some pretty elaborate production jigs, and would have put everything in place. During the assembly.
Yeah, getting it in place is one thing, but there's really no adjustability.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's the problem. They come right out. They either fit perfect or they come like a mile out of whack. And they're pretty difficult compared to most other cars that I've worked on. So that may have changed had that car, gone through more development. But Tremulous designed it quick, like super quick, like in a couple of days. And then they made tooling, which was not great tooling, and they stamped the panels out that really didn't fit each other, and they required a tremendous amount of modification and handwork to make that car one piece. But they did it, and they did it well, and the cars looked pretty good. A lot of the panels maybe touched each other and broke the paint off, or some gaps were huge and some were tight, some were overlapping. So they weren't perfect cars. Mm-hmm. The car that we're restoring is not perfect either, and that's intentional. We're trying to make it closer to how they could have looked, but not embarrassing either. We don't want the doors to chip the paint off. So we're trying to find that sweet spot where it doesn't look fake, but it also has some of that handmade Tucker look about it.
So with a Tucker, then you're in that weird spot between kind of the Mopar restorers who put every possible flaw in there. Like they know that, Jeff that was out in the paint shop who worked at that plant on Thursday when the car was painted, he was going bald, so there's going to be a hair of his someplace in the paint.
The mayflies were out, Of course, not there, but
he's got little bug tracks walking across the A-pillar and stuff like that. So is it like that with the Tucker restorers? Do they look at and I don't know if there's a perfect one out there where somebody took the time and gapped every panel and made it flawless. I don't know if they look at that car and kind of turn their noses up and think, overachiever.
Yeah, well, that does exist, and we've been struggling with that because for us as a shop, we want the car to leave as perfect as we can make it. But that's really only patting ourselves on the back. That isn't really, making this car tell a story. And it's supposed to be telling a story. It's supposed to show people what these things look like. They were handmade cars. They weren't perfect. The panels didn't line up. The horizon lines were all out of whack. The fender was pointing one way and the door was going the other way. So you had to find kind of a happy medium. We tried to not make this car look too perfect so that it looks like a slicked out modern hot rod, but not embarrassing either. So if you look on the inside of the bumpers, you're going to see welds and hammer marks when they beat them up with a ball peen hammer to try to make them fit. That's still all in there. We didn't get rid of that. There's the surfaces of the bumpers. We improved them, but they don't fit. The left piece doesn't fit the right piece exactly because it fits the way they made them fit. So we're trying to be kind of true to showing that they are handmade cars and they're not perfect.
And that's really awesome. And I mean, when you stop to consider too, all of these cars were prototypes basically when you get down to it. I mean, I don't think there's any other mark out there that has 50 prototypes floating.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And out of the 50, 47 of the cars are still together and exist and
Wow.
run and everything. They're all there.
Are there any cars that are missing?
No, I believe they're all accounted for, but they're gone, crushed and destroyed. But I don't think that there's any mystery cars out there.
So
how many have you had your hands on?
51.
I've had my hands on number 51, which was the next car in line. So Tucker counted up 50. 51 was right behind it. That car was owned by a close friend of ours in New Jersey. His name was Chick DiLorenzo. He's gone now. He died probably 7 or 8 years ago. But he was a major help for us. He made that car available to us so that we were able to measure it and take patterns and templates and anything that we needed so that we can hand make our own car. We did a little bit of restoration work on that car for him. And recently we made some axles for the Tin Goose. Do you know about the Tin Goose? That is the prototype car. That car lives in the Swaggart Museum in Western Pennsylvania. That car is known for the wheels falling off. They literally fall off. The axles and suspension break on that car. And so recently they sent us the original axles, which were made by Tucker in his machine shop by shortening an axle and welding the hub onto it. So it was actually a welded axle. And so it broke 100 times during its life, and everybody would just kind of weld it back together or try to come up with some kind of bolt solution or what. But this time we actually machined new axles for the Tin Goose out of one piece and had them hardened and splined and all that stuff. So now the that problem is now solved. After 70 years, the wheels should stay on the Tin Goose, and at least on the back. I don't know what's going on up front, but on the back, we're hoping that the wheels stay on. So because that car needs to actually get on its wheels, roll, and drive for Pebble Beach. And so I heard just yesterday that the car is running and will drive across the lawn of Pebble Beach
without the wheels falling off.
With hopefully no wheels falling off. I'm sure the rears won't. Hopefully the fronts won't. So we've had our hands on 51 on the Tin Goose, and now 44 for its full restoration. And that car, we're touching every piece on it. Broke it down as far as you can break a car down.
I did a little bit of research on a lot of the Tuckers that were out there. Wikipedia, of course, may not be the most accurate thing at times, but it kind of broke down each car and where it was at. Yeah. And one of the cars that fascinated me the most, and I don't know if it's a real one or not, but it was the convertible.
Okay, yes. I don't know much about the convertible. What I've been told is that there was a theory or a thought or a story that it was a secret project that Preston Tucker was working on. Unfortunately, there isn't any real documentation to prove that. Yeah. So no one really knows what the truth is. But I think without documentation, we can only assume that it's not a true story. It could be, but you can't base anything on that without any documentation, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. But it's a cool looking car.
It's a great looking car. Somebody did a fabulous job on the build. I think I was told that it had maybe a Pontiac convertible top that they adapted to it.
It gives it a completely different look.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the car got kind of a bad rap because of the lack of documentation and the story. I think had they presented it maybe where it was not trying to legitimize the fact that it was a Preston Tucker concept, the car could have been accepted on a different level as a very cool design study. Mm-hmm. And I like it. I mean, I think it's a great project, and I think the car's kind of hidden away now because of the bad
too bad
aura around it, which is unfortunate because it shouldn't have that. Whoever owns it really should be proud of it, and people should.
Right. Yeah, it's a great looking car. Another thing that I found that was really fascinating is even the ones that through the life of the car had maybe I know one hit a tree, one was in a fire. Well, you find out that some of those cars even donated some of their parts for restorations for the others.
Absolutely.
Which is fascinating.
It's excellent that they can live on. And I think I think it goes by number 57, was restored recently, and it was at Amelia Island last year. Beautiful car, red, just gorgeous car. And I think that some of the parts lend themselves from some of the wrecked cars. And they created that car.
Yeah.
Too neat.
Yeah, it's great.
So, Rob, whatever became of the fiberglass Tucker that you guys were developing?
Well, we still have them, and we built four. We built four of those cars. Now, we never offered them for sale as far as like a kit or anything like that. Mm-hmm. We keep them really for ourselves. So the cars that we've built have always been our own build, and if we sell it when it's finished, that's what we do. But we don't really take orders for them, and we build them the way we like to build them. So that way we can keep our integrity. Because early on we thought about maybe taking orders of building cars, and right away we heard, we want one with a blown Hemi in the front, and we want to do this, and we want to do all this crazy stuff. And we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to make the cars a circus act. We wanted to make the cars cool and have our own look. And,
nice.
So that's what we've done.
That shows how much you guys respect the heritage, and we all really appreciate that. So thank you.
Oh, well, that's what we're about. So thanks for noticing that. But yeah, that's what we do. I mean, it would have been easy. We could have been cranking bodies out everywhere and selling them like crazy, taking the short money. But we just didn't feel that that's what we're about. And so we did one car for the movie Sin City 2. Right. With Robert Rodriguez. He made the movie with Frank Miller. Lots of stars, Bruce Willis and Jessica Alba, and big cast. So we made a car for that movie, and the car looked nice and shiny and new and looked great. And when it was finished, we got the car back, because I didn't want to sell the car to the movie company. I only leased it to them because I wanted to have it back when it was done. So once I got the car back, it's kind of a movie prop. It moves under its own power, and it's okay to look at from 50 feet away, but it's not really a high quality car. It's just a movie prop. So 5 years ago, we took it out to the Bonneville for the Gyronauts 50th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And the Gyronaut,
I remember that well.
Yeah. Okay. So the Gyronaut is the world's fastest motorcycle that held a record between 1963 and 1970. And we did the restoration 5 years ago, and we brought it to Bonneville for its 50th anniversary.
I was there at Bonneville. I got to tell you, watching people lose their mind, dude. That was like the funniest thing. And people are like flipping out. How could somebody bring a Tucker out here on the Salt? It was great. Like, it's a glass car, right? No, it's not. It's an original car. No, it's not an original car. That's why it's out here.
Yeah. We had rust on it. We made it look like an old rusty barn find. But the reason why we wanted to have the Tucker out there is because the Gyronaut was designed and built by Alex Tremulous, the designer of Tucker. So Tucker hired him to design his car in 47 to 48. And now in 63, he's still doing cool stuff, and he's designing the world's fastest motorcycle. So when his nephew, Steve Tremulous, purchased the bike, he contacted us, and knowing, our love for the work of Alex Tremulous and Preston Tucker, we said, okay, well, we're not really motorcycle guys, and we're really not even restorers, but yes, that project will do. So send it over. So we did that one. So we had to create a couple of things that were gone from the crash, like the canopy and the engine cover, but it was a pretty straightforward restoration. The chassis and engine was already restored when it came to me, so that part was easy. We really just had to do the body and all that. So we brought it out to Bob LePan. He was the original driver and engine builder and creator of the chassis. And so we brought it out to see him in Michigan, and then we kept going on to Bonneville, and they were going to allow him to make an exhibition run at 150 miles an hour. Of course, the bike is capable of 270.
Wow!
But he was unable to get out of the bike fast enough to pass the bailout test, so they wouldn't allow him to make the run, which I think was fine anyway, because he doesn't need to prove anything more. I mean, he didn't. The bike was that fast, And when he crashed it, he just nearly lost his arm. He dragged his arm on the salt for miles, and it ground his arm away. And they were able to save his arm. It was like a miracle, but they saved his arm, which was great because he said that without two arms, he can't ride a motorcycle. And if he can't ride a motorcycle, he has no will to live because that's what he does. And I think within the last maybe 10 years, he set another record at Bonneville on a motorcycle. So we're talking about a guy who's done the Isle of Man. I mean, he's done it all. This guy is the real thing. So fascinating people that I've been able to deal with these Tucker projects and the Gyronaut and all this crazy stuff that we get involved in. But, the cars are great, but it's really the people that you meet and the stories that you're able to hear and be a part of. That's what really makes this stuff special. I mean, the equipment is awesome, but when you can really connect with someone and the history and the love for the thing, that's when I'm most inspired.
Well, dude, thank you very much for doing this. I know it's getting late back there, and we're a whole lot behind you, so we're okay with sleep, but it's getting late where you're at. But
because we could talk to you until tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you right now, speaking for the guys, we definitely want to have you on. But next time around, we will not bring up Tuckers.
Okay.
We'll just talk about you, Porsches. What you do. Yes, there you go.
We got to finish that game show too.
Yeah, he got the first question right. What was the second question?
Oh, he did well. He went way past the bonus round. We're too.
Yeah. And what did
he's
win,
about ready to
Brian?
take the physical challenge now.
I'm not giving
Thank
him
you
a
again,
physical.
Rob, very much, man. Thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for thinking of me. And anytime you want to talk, I'm always good.
I
We definitely want to have you back on. Absolutely.
Cool. Sounds good.
Hey, thank you again for your time, and I know it's a weeknight, and thank you for staying up, and send our thanks to your family for letting us commandeer you for some time here.
No problem. They were happy to get rid of me.
Well,
All right,
thank you
guys.
again, sir. You have a
Thank
great
you again,
night.
sir.
Have a good night.
Hi, Rob.
Bye.
Thank you.
Well, I got to tell you, that was a great interview, and I know about you guys, but I am certainly tuckered out after that one. Boo. Yeah, whatever. No, it was a great time.
Yeah.
I want to say thanks again to Mr. Rob Ida for taking time out in the middle of what is obviously an always very busy week for him. Hope you guys had a great time too. Well, thanks again for listening, and until next time, I'm still Brian.
I'm still Brad.
Still Alex.
I'm still Eric, but I'm tuckered out.
Ooh, nice.
Oh, a callback
Boom.
seconds after. Wow, okay. Nice. All right.
You can edit that.
Thanks again for listening, and be sure to keep up with us Gearheads over on our website at www.round6pod.com. And if you'd like to, we invite you to follow along with us over on Facebook, Instagram, and be sure to check out all of our latest videos on youtube.com.